Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down.
Here we are, folks.
Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna let it away. Tonight, we're gonna let it away. Tonight, we're gonna let it away. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna let it away.
Welcome back once again. This is Chris Report, and he assured me that St. Simon's down in Boulders. Folks, this is Chris Wyatt reporting from South Africa. Good morning, folks. Welcome back. Monday, February 26, 2024. Just another manic Monday right here on Chris Wyatt Reports. Plenty of news to talk about today, including Jacob Zuma's Mkhonto party making the news all over the place and not always for the right reasons. Well, we've also got things going on back here in the States. Breaking news here out of these United States of America. Die Vereinigten Staaten von Amerika, des États-Unis. We have breaking news. Donald John Trump and his sons have appealed the outrageous, ludicrous, non-crime, non-victim verdict against him for $464 million, and each of the sons for $4 million apiece. They've filed their official appeal. This is a case that will likely find its way to the Supreme Court or a judicial service commission of some sort to review the criminal acts of this lunatic judge. Could you have picked a more ridiculous-looking individual to be the judge? I mean, I really don't think you could have in this case. This man is absolutely outrageous, his behavior. Let me say hello to everyone in the chat. We'll get to the news here very shortly, but it is Monday, just another manic Monday. You were listening to Robin Huston there for the opening. That's I See Danger in Your Eyes. Light It Up is the song. And of course, before that was none other than our friend Giselle, whose cancer appears to be in remission, thankfully. That is good news for her. Giselle singing Afrikaans song for uns Mensa. And, you know, along that line, folks, for those in South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, even if you're in Eswatini, if you find yourself a little concerned about what's going on in life, don't panic. All you have to do is the following. Where are we at here? Looking at the desktop. This is all you got to do. Keep this in your mind. There you go. If you're a little bit upset, just keep calm and praat Afrikaans. Thought I'd share that with you. Right, let's see what we got going on here now. Let's move this. We get a little bit larger there so it covers the clock a little bit better. There we go. Keep calm and praat Afrikaans. Teresa's here. Esther Kotze. Polly is in from Western Cape. Brian Lawrenson. George Steinberg. Pip Jacobs. Hello, Pip. And then Alter Bridge, Teresa. Nick Muller, George Steinberg. I said that comments by Zuma mean that there will be no need for police and the justice. Of course not. Why would you need police when you have African justice, traditional justice, when all disputes are handled by a traditional leader who makes an arbitrary decision based on listening to what people have to say? Yeah, beautiful day in South Carolina, the Palmetto State. Good to hear that Nick Muller's here as well. RJ, such a banger. Yeah, that is a great song by Robin Huston from windy Cape Town. 6 minutes into the morning in Australia. Dusty says, what a lovely day here in the Western Province. Good to see you again, Dusty. Ken says, when has Zuma ever worried about the law? That's true. He never has. And Sue Walsh is back. Welcome. Colonel Mike. Who's Colonel Mike, man? Since the Cox have cut off Haley's funding, does that mean she's going to step down? No, she won't, Menage a Trois, and you've stolen my thunder. That's one of the stories I'm reporting today. Nikki Haley has lost her gravy train cash funding coming from the uber-wealthy Koch brothers, who love to fund rhinos. And it's funny because the left always talks about the Koch brothers and how they fund extreme MAGA candidates. No, they don't. They fund leftist rhinos. Trump will lose. They don't want Trump to run for president. Well, Trump is definitely facing a huge backlash from the fake media and the establishment. Right, Gus is here. No, it's okay, Sue. No worries. I don't know who Mike is. I thought you were talking about somebody else. What is prat? It's a verb for speak. In German, it's sprechen. In French, it's parler. And in Afrikaans, it's prat. So there you go. Kind of like, no, it's not a fart. It's prat Afrikaans. What is going on? YouTube just keeps making this thing spin. Nasty, nasty YouTube. Anyway, welcome back to the 58 people currently watching the program. It is a pleasure. For those who didn't catch the news last week, I announced that I am running for state representative. It's equivalent of an MEC for provincial legislature in South Africa. So if I lived in the Western Cape, I'd be running for the Western Cape provincial legislature. Here I'm running for the state legislature against 4 other opponents. It's a very crowded field. My challenge is people don't know who I am, and so getting in front of people, getting to know me, that makes all the difference, and that is the challenge. Not an easy thing, but we'll make the best of it. Can't sit on the sidelines and carp and complain. It's time to jump into the fire. Zelda says, greetings from Western Province. Okay. Excuse me. Anyway. Well, I hope I win too, Alter Bridge, but good luck with that. It's not an easy process. Waiting to hear back for some folks, getting some new campaign materials, also planning a digital and mail-in campaign. That's a pricey option because the Postal Service is outrageous rates, even though wholesale, but still quite pricey. But working on that. So anyway, let's get to the news, folks. Thanks for being here with me once again. As I said, the breaking news at the top of the hour. Here is Donald John Trump and his sons have filed an appeal in the lawsuit in which this crazy judge gave a judgment. He declared Trump guilty before the trial was even conducted, so there should be misconduct and it should be set aside, this judgment. Trump and adult sons, former Trump organization officials, appeal civil fraud judgment in New York, the most ludicrous civil fraud case in the history of the state of New York. Former President Trump, his adult sons, and 2 former Trump organization officials have appealed the $464 million judgment against them in New York Attorney General Letitia James' corrupt civil fraud case. They filed a notice of appeal in the court today, the first business day after lunatic judge Anguron made the judgment official. Trump is personally on the hook for $454 million, including interest payments. In the filing, the authorities have said they were appealing the money judgment. Now, here's the question I have. How can Donald Trump have to pay interest when the judgment was just determined? It's not as if he hasn't paid the bill. So why would he have interest payments on a verdict that just declared against him? He didn't actually get this money. He didn't benefit money. This is a fraudulent determination. What they're trying to say is that he somehow came out with an advantage years ago, and that because of that, he has to pay interest on money he never realized. This is just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. But it is lawfare, and it is the world we live in today. So that's just a reality that Donald Trump has to deal with on his way back to the White House. Well, Sleepy Joe suddenly realizes that criminal alien migration is not what we need. Former President Jacob Zuma proposes to exile teenage parents, but the girls, not the boys, amid high pregnancy rates. Former President Jacob Zuma's vow to exile teen parents has resurfaced after he announced that the proposal will come to pass under an Umkhonto we Sizwe government. Of course, there will be no Umkhonto we Sizwe government. According to law, a child should not give birth to a child. That's not life. It's a disease. We will end it, says Jacob Zuma. I'm sorry. I'm very confused. Yesterday, he said that we should not deal with Roman Dutch Roman law. We shouldn't have law. Well, that's the law he's referring to. So yesterday you castigate Dutch Roman law and say that, well, we are going to use African law, traditional customary law. But traditional customary law, it's not illegal for little girls to get pregnant. In fact, it's kind of encouraged, By the way, if you want to punish teen pregnancy, you don't punish the girls. Somebody dipped their wick in there, and you need to deal with that. They're going to exile them to Robben Island. That's his plan. Yep. He said that the MK will build a university on Robben Island for pregnant teenagers to complete their studies. This comes about after 90,000 underage girls reported to be pregnant last year. In 2015, Zuma said that teenage parents would be separated from their babies and taken to Robben Island. He said the main reason was for them to complete their studies so they could be able to provide for their children and also contribute towards economic growth. On Sunday, he delivered a keynote address to the MK party in Makoko, KZN. He outlined the plans to address such societal issues. It was encouraged people to vote for his party. Yes. Well, the problem with all this, of course, is that he wants to put pregnant girls on Robben Island in prison. Didn't the apartheid government imprison black activists on Robben Island during the apartheid era? Wow. Isn't it lovely how black African racists and leaders love to complain about apartheid all the time, and then they do the exact same thing that they accuse the minority government of having done back in the day? Are you serious? Are you serious? It's just comical, to say the least. Pin Jacobs, good night, have to go. Well, sorry to see you have to leave. It's early. What's going on? Extend Robben Island too small. Too small. It is too small for pregnant girls. So why are pregnant girls being pressured? How about, he wants to send them to university. Why would 16 and 15-year-old girls go to university? That doesn't make any sense. They can finish high school, but they don't have time for university, raising infants and toddlers. And by the way, these young ladies became pregnant not through divine intervention like Mary, but through an act committed by a male of the species, not a transgender, but a male of the species, engaged. They kind of did this, and they linked up, and they produced a baby, oftentimes a consequence of child molestation by men, and incest by men, and rape by thugs in South Africa. So, if you want to address teenage pregnancy, how about you address the scourge of irresponsible behavior by men? That would be a good start. Putting pregnant girls on Robben Island makes about as much sense as electing Jacob Zuma to be president of South Africa. Yeah. Yes, we can always blame the male, Jonathan, and we can always blame the female, unless she was a victim. We can always blame the male. That's correct. No male is ever put at gunpoint and expected to get a stiff tent pole to dip that wick in. That never happens. Tell me a case of that. Please, somebody, give me a case or the frequency of when males are held by gunpoint under threat of life and limb to stick their wick inside. Tell me, please, one time. One time. Yeah, University in Robben Island, it's comical. They'll own Epstein Island. I don't know about that. Well, mistakes at Kendall. Well, after we hear Ramakopa, the electric slide minister, you can do it. It's electric. Boogie, woogie, woogie. The electric slide minister from South Africa, Ramakopa, says that, things are on the mend, but at the same time, we just lost 3 gigawatts of generating capacity. Mistakes at Kendall are being addressed after a major outage, says Ramakopa. This ministry position needs to be wiped out when the ANC is out of government. Ramakopa says mistakes that led to major outage at Kendall are being addressed. Last Thursday, 5 of the power station's units were lost, essentially equivalent to 3 stages of load shedding. 2 units are back in service, and another expected to come online sometime today. Electricity minister, how silly is that to have an electricity minister? It's so embarrassing for a country like South Africa, once the industrial powerhouse of all of Africa. Electricity minister Kojesencho Ramakopa said that mistakes led to major outage. Yeah, the lost capacity was roughly 3 gigawatts or 3 stages of load shedding, along with another unit at Duva that was out. We're going to have these temporary setbacks. This was a setback. The team identified what was the root cause. Yeah, the root cause was the ANC. I can tell you that now without even looking at the facility. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here's a word of caution and warning, especially if you're a tourist and you have a kind heart and you offer a ride to people who look down and out and destitute. Be wary. Be very wary. An elderly German offered a ride to a hitchhiker in Northwest after coming back from Botswana, and his reward was to be murdered for his troubles. Yep. Elderly German tourist killed by hitchhiker he befriended. 3 men who allegedly beat, kidnapped, and murdered a 74-year-old German tourist have been arrested. The victim departed from Botswana Friday and drove to South Africa. He arrived at Lepala in the Waterbury district on Saturday morning, said police spokesman Mandasela Ledweba. He said the tourist stopped to give a male hitchhiker a lift. They had friendly interaction. The tourist asked his passenger for advice about where to stay in Northwest, where he would continue his journey across the country. On arrival in Moraleng, the suspect suggested they stop at a liquor outlet where he had a few drinks. Mistake number 2. That's when the suspect told his 2 friends the elderly man was expecting a substantial amount of money from his family abroad. They drove him to where he was staying. There they allegedly tied him up, assaulted him, demanding his bank PIN code. They searched him and took an undisclosed amount of cash and valuables. They removed the number plates and drove the victim while allegedly assaulting him to Northam in Limpopo using a secluded gravel road. At a farm, 2 suspects dragged him from the vehicle and dumped him in the bushes. Police officers found the victim's body in the bushes. Yeah. Big mistake there. Well, Jacob Zuma, as I said, in the news yet again, and this time his party is in jeopardy of screwing up royally. You see, you need 15,000 signatures to appear on the ballot, but apparently they're getting conflicting information from the party's founder. Umkhonto we Sizwe, backed by former President Zuma, is in panic mode over Electoral Commission required forms. The party's founder, Jabulani Kumalo, apparently told party supporters and members that the IEC forms were an attempt to infiltrate the organization. This unintentionally erroneous message led to a drumbeat of explanations to party leaders, supporters, and members. The IEC forms deadline is looming. As per the 2023 Electoral Amendment Act, the IEC requires that all political parties contesting elections this year have 15,000 registered members and supporters on the IEC portal. You have to have 50,000 or you won't be on the ballot. Yep. Matter urgent and high risk as it could affect the party's victory nationally in terms of provincial seats. Do not throw away or destroy the forms, comrades. They're important. Without the Appendix 11 form, the party will collapse. Wow. So Umkhonto we Sizwe in a little bit of trouble here. They need 15,000 signatures rapidly. Better hurry. Better hurry. Clock is ticking away. They are ticking away. The Democratic Alliance Manifesto, Farrell Haffajee does an analysis of it. And I'll just go through some of the highlights here. Interesting by the Daily Maverick here. There's John Steenhuisen at the manifesto launch last week. Right there. The DA says the country is in a state of collapse. They're correct. It bills its manifesto as a rescue plan, emphasizing streamlining professionalism, but it raises eyebrows by stripping out any form of black empowerment, replacing with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a target. Well, both of these are ludicrous ideas. Black supremacy is racism, and United Nations Development Goals are ludicrous. South Africa shouldn't have to achieve UN development goals. It should be able to set its own goals. Well, here are some of the things that the Democratic Alliance is calling for in its manifesto. Okay? All right, grants and social support. They want the basic income grants and social policy. They want increased child support grant from 510 to 760 rand so that people can continue to knock out children at working taxpayer expense. And you can fund the raising of someone else's child or pay for their chibuku or their kaso lager. Extend the child support grant to pregnant mothers to support child nutrition. So you're going to give child money to a woman who's getting welfare already. Streamline disability grants. Well, that's a good idea. Target vulnerable people during food price shocks. How? Convert the social relief to distress grant into a job seekers grant. That sounds interesting. Climate change, a study focused on renewable energy and commit to net zero carbon emissions. Okay, again, a leftist party. The Democratic Alliance is not a conservative party. Anyone that thinks it is very confused. It is a leftist political party. It is a socialist party. It's what it's always been, and it's what it'll always be. It is not a conservative party, despite the fact there are conservatives in their ranks. Crime and corruption. Protect whistleblowers. Good. Appoint a new police watchdog. Okay, all right. How about an ombudsman? That'd be a start. Economy, remove race as employment criterion, replace it with UN Sustainable Development Goals. No, just eliminate it altogether. The UN should not come into play here. No new taxes. Well, there's a bunch of new taxes. You're going to have to roll those back. Stabilize debt and one-stop shop for small businesses. Okay. Education, ensure that each child gets 210 teaching days per year. 210, why not 300 or 290? Yeah, promote science. Okay, yeah, great. Okay. Reduce the number of ministers, deputy ministers, and ministerial offices. That helps, but in a small way. Focus on infrastructure. Yeah. End water shedding. Okay. Abolish caterer deployment and outlaw it. Yeah. Remove BE from all state procurement. Those are actually good things. Yep. Oppose the National Health Insurance Bill. What's the National Health Insurance Law as soon as Ramaphosa signs it? So good luck with that. Protect property rights as enshrined in the Constitution. Expand land ownership. That's a good one. Okay. Civil service. Rebuild the Public Service Commission. Reality check. Now, this is what Farrell Haffajee, the analyst and journalist at Daily Maverick, has to say. Except for the racial blindness on BE, it's an excellent manifesto. With South Africa's history of colonialism and apartheid and its racial inequality, the party risks its future if it removes black empowerment completely. Let's just address Farrell Haffagee's comments. Racial inequality does exist in South Africa. Black supremacy is the order of the day. If you're a minority and you're not black, you are discriminated against daily in South Africa across the board. While the very racists who discriminate against you falsely claim that you have some sort of advantage, that you have a leg up when they are constantly stealing and discriminating against you. So there is racial inequality, but it's black supremacy being applied in South Africa today. History of colonialism and apartheid. Colonialism ended in 1910, and apartheid ended in 1992. Not 94. It was over in 92. Elections were in 94. So what does an event that happened 32 years ago have to do with ANC governance failed for 30 years? Special privileges for people based on skin color is racist, Farrell Haffajee. And the fact that you cannot see that is pretty sad as you consider yourself a journalist. If the same thing were flipped around, if the gold government turns around right now, let's say this. No one has said this, but I'm going to say this right now. Let's say that, because the media likes to say that the DA is white. It's not. It's majority colored. It's voters. That's the support base. But let's say that the white DA takes power and they begin implementing policies completely the opposite. White economic empowerment policies and white policies to end 30 years of racial discrimination against whites and other minorities. Would that be okay? No, it wouldn't. No different than the racist policies of the ANC now and your color-blind lunacy, Farrell Haffajee. Well, you'd like to come on the program, Farrell? I'd love to have you on and talk about this. I read a lot of your articles, and you're a decent journalist, but this is just nonsense. Just nonsense. The party risks its future if it removes black empowerment completely. No. The party risks South Africa's future if it allows black economic empowerment, a corrupt, racist policy, to continue. She found the manifesto proposals on lifting people out of poverty and education, professionalism, public service, especially in crime and corruption, to be very good. Yeah. Anyway, that's Farrell Haffagee's take on the Democratic Alliance's manifesto, which was launched recently. Mpisa Nakula, the failed defense minister and clown, actually she's done a pretty good job as a Speaker of Parliament. I'll give her credit for that. Done a pretty good job in an impossible situation, but she is just a typical leeching and sucking off the teat of the taxpayer permanent political cater. But she has 10 days to respond to allegations on the Parliament Secretary's ballooning salary. National Assembly Speaker Nosizwe Mapisa Nakula has to answer for allegations relating to the salary of Parliament Secretary Zole George. The DA filed a complaint against National Assembly Speaker Nosizwe Mapisa Nakula for allegedly misleading MPs over George's salary. His salary went from an advertised $2.6 million to a whopping $4.4 million in less than a year. And her term is about to expire here, so she won't be in that anymore. Now, my question is, Zoile George, who's sleeping with Zoile George? Is this a Fannie Willis situation? Well, it's okay for our people. Our people. Talk about a dog whistle, a racist dog whistle. It's okay for our people to buy beer with the 350 Rand grant. Cyril Ramaphosa, the man with the ever-expanding waistline. ANC President Ramaphosa quipped at the weekend that there is nothing wrong with the beneficiaries of the $350 welfare payment to decide to use their grants to buy beer because they're our people. He made the comment to a packed Moses Madiba Stadium on Saturday during the launch of the ANC's manifesto. Recent polling shows that the ruling party support will dip below 50%, but the party supporters flocked to the stadium in their thousands despite the scorching heat, with hundreds having to be allowed on the pitch because the stadium had reached its capacity. Water became the most sought-after commodity as the party did not provide enough for those who were at the stadium. Well, there you go. So it's okay to drink beer with your social welfare taken out of someone else's pocket. You get to drink beer instead of feeding yourself and paying your bills and meeting your responsibilities. It's okay because they're our people. Dog whistle, racist. Dog whistle, racist. Can you say racist, Sir Ramaphosa? Racist. Yep. Everything is racist with the ANC. Well, what's the most powerful WhatsApp group in South Africa? Do you know? Do you know? It's the Cater Deployment WhatsApp group. Yeah. Records of ANC's Cater Deployment Committee handed over to the DA last week and revealed how appointments to key state institutions were steered through a WhatsApp group. Among the appointments discussed in the group include Auditor General, the Hawks, Information Regulator, and Deputy General positions, Department of Justice, Department of Communications. The group also discussed PRASA, the Central Energy Fund, the National Lotteries Commission, South African Maritime Safety Authority, National Port Regulator, Development Bank of South Africa, and the Media Development and Diversity Agency. In other words, basically every state organ of any influence in South Africa was influenced by these corrupt criminals in the ANC using a WhatsApp group. Well, fiscal support from the Treasury helps Ramakopa, the electric slide minister. Don't forget, folks, the electric slide minister. You can do it. It's electric. Boogie, woogie, woogie. Yeah, that's right. The electric slide minister says that fiscal support from the Treasury, out of your pocket, has helped maintain maintenance at ESCOM. The trend line is positive after 3 gigawatts of power goes offline yesterday. ESCOM has managed to call back 3,510 megawatts or 3.5 gigawatts. And they've ramped up their energy availability factor and planned maintenance between January and January this year. That's actually all factually lies. Lies. The energy availability factor reached a nadir in November and December of 2023. A low. How low can they go? Well, lower than the lies of this gentleman. Anyway, Ellie's, the South African, or Ely's, however you pronounce it, the South African not appliance, but electrical connection company. It sells extension cords and electrical devices, is in trouble. Yep. Another sign of South Africa's collapsing economy. Ellie's, the major outlet that sells all these cabling, has issued a trading statement warning it expects a half-year loss to be per share to triple from its previous loss. Company expects to report a loss per share of 12.8 cents to 13.66 cents, 215% worse than the 4.34 cents it reported last year. Expects a headline loss. Wow, this is bad. At the end of 2022, they reported total comprehensive loss of 35 million rand for the first half of year trading. With its pre-share losses expected to almost triple, after-tax loss will also no doubt worsen. Yep. It would allow shareholders to buy an additional 2.13 shares for every share they own for 7 cents. Trying to get 120 million rand. So their way out of this morass is in an environment where they're not selling things to sell shares to shareholders who will risk their wealth even further. Well, Sasol loses 34%. Yeah, another sign of South Africa's collapsing economy. 34% decline in half-year profit. The world's biggest producer of fuels and chemicals from coal and gas said its headline earnings per share, the most common profit measure, was 20 rand in 6 months, down from 30 rand in the corresponding period. Company declared an interim dividend of 2 rand per share. Yep. Sasol losing money. Seacom, a sea cable that runs through the Red Sea, has an outage. Might explain why some people are having difficulty with the internet in South Africa if you're trying to reach Europe. Seacom has announced it's been experiencing a severe outage of its subsea cable system in the Red Sea since February 24th. 2 days ago. Company says it's been unable to confirm the cause of the cable break and added that other cables in the area have also appeared to be impacted. It said the disruption is only on a segment of cable running from Mombasa to Zafarana, Egypt. Now let's see what could possibly be happening in the Red Sea right now. I know I'm at a loss. Maybe the Houthis sinking ships to the bottom of the Red Sea. Maybe that's what caused this outage on the cable. Do you think maybe the shells that land and go down, explode underwater maybe, and are those that sink ships that land on top of cables might have an impact on the cable? I don't know. We don't know. But it's a guess, and not a bad guess if you ask me. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am here to expose racism in its worst form. This racism, clearly, Jan van Riebeck, Hendrik Verwoerd, John Foster, F.W. de Klerk, P.W. Botha, all of these criminals against humanity are all responsible for the failure to allow unqualified people to be on this team. This team, a robotics team that is going to Texas to represent South Africa, is clearly the product of racism, clearly the product of racial exclusion, clearly the product of ANC Bantu education. Maybe that's what it is. Cape Town robotics team to represent South African global competition in USA. My goodness, I only see a couple of people who aren't white on that team. Stop the racism. Stop it now. It's clear we must address this. My goodness, you must replace those white faces with brown and black faces simply because there are too many whites on that robotics team. Yes, indeed. Clearly a case of racism here. Cape Town, obviously they didn't pick these kids based on merit because they don't want to win. They want to win the diversity Olympics. That's right. So South Africa sends its robotics team to Texas. It's going to lose the diversity Olympics. Shame. They've already lost. It's pure racism. Look at that, all those whiteys there. My goodness, my goodness. What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this? Cape Town Robotics team has proven that they have what it takes to compete in the world's best after they were named the national champions of the first tech challenge. I call racism, racism. If only these children were kept on Robben Island, then they wouldn't be able to perpetuate the crimes of their people against the Africans. TechSpend, a team comprising school learners from ages 12 to 17, come from various communities across the province, including Pinelands, Mitchell's Plain, Simonstown, Plumstead, Greybow, and Robertson. And I call BS. There's no way there's anybody from Mitchell's Plains out there. We all know that only black people live in Mitchell's Plains, and there are no black kids on that team. Yes, we are now searching the records of these 12 to 17-year-olds, RJ, to determine if there are any Jews on the team. My goodness. God forbid we have any people who deny Palestine being on this team. The competition took place at Table View last week, saw 21 of the top teams around the country battle it out for the top spot. The competition sees over 9,000 teams from across the globe compete in regional and national events, and everyone has their eyes set on the global competition. The first championship is set to take place in Houston, Texas, from April 17th to April 20th. First Tech Challenge is a competition for youth to learn to apply science, technology, engineering, and math in a fun, creative, and competitive environment. Every year, the competitors are faced with a brand new robotics game with various tasks and challenges that must perform and outscore the opposing teams. And that is clearly racist. Clearly racist. Nobody is doing initiation rites as part of this robotics test. We must deal with this blatant Jan van Riebeck racism. Must deal with it. Must deal with it. Well, folks, a Norwegian cruise liner with suspected cholera. Ooh, no, say it ain't so. It's not in the Caribbean. Norwegian cruise line ship carrying 2,000 passengers forced to quarantine off the coast of Mauritius amid fears of a cholera outbreak. Ooh, it's due in the loo. It's due in the loo on the Norwegian Dawn. It was turned away from the port of St. Louis due to potential health risk after 15 passengers were put in isolation because they got the trots. The isolated passengers underwent testing after they started experiencing symptoms of a stomach-related illness, according to a spokesman for U.S.-based Norwegian Cruise Lines. I'm sure this is racist. Probably white people giving the black people the poison. Multiple media outlets reported the stomach illness was suspected to be cholera. Mauritius Ministry of Health Director Dr. Bouchon Ori revealed, however, today that the results had since determined there was no evidence of cholera in the sick passenger, instead battling gastroenteritis. Aha! Aha! It's a racist plot to undermine the white monopoly capital of Norwegian Cruise Lines being prevented from docking in Mauritius. The brown people of Mauritius have discriminated against the white monopoly capital. It's racism! There is no cholera, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a tummy ache. Yeah. Anyway, moving right along. Sudanese authorities have blocked access to prevent cross-border aid from getting to Darfur, a region once again in conflict owing to the RSF and the government forces. Authorities loyal to the army and war-ravaged Sudan have blocked cross-border aid to the western Darfur region, a move decried by aid workers and by the United States. Look at that photograph, folks. What do you see in that photograph? Nothing except people. You know, Sam Kinison said it right. Sam Kinison hit it nail on the head back in the 1980s. It's a desert. Move! Move! Don't live in a desert. There's nothing there. The Ethiopian authorities have arrested a French journalist who was in Addis Ababa to cover the African Union. Of course, he lived in Ethiopia for 4 years and was a thorn in the authorities' side. That's why the fascist regime of totalitarian dictator Prime Minister Ahmed Abe have arrested him. Journalist arrested. Committee to protect journalists, the French journalist Antoine Galindo, detained in Ethiopia. Ethiopian authorities must immediately unconditionally release French journalist Antoine Galindo, who was unjustly detained on Thursday under alarming circumstances. On February 22nd at 3:55, Galindo, who reports for the Paris-based privately owned news site Africa Intelligence, was detained by security forces in civilian clothing in Addis Ababa. He was detained at the Ethiopian Skylight Hotel while interviewing Bate Urgesa, a political officer from the Oromo Liberation Front, a party legally recognized in Ethiopia. The baseless and unjustified detention of Antoine Galindo for carrying out his legitimate journalistic duties is outrageous, and Ethiopian authorities must release him immediately without condition. Antoine Galindo's arrest is yet another example of the dismal press record for freedom in Ethiopia, where at least 8 journalists are behind bars for their work and who must be released urgently. Wow. Wow. he was taken to the Bole, Rwanda police station. That's out near where I live, Bole. Well, ECOWAS has lifted sanctions again, this time against Guinea and Mali after taking them off of Niger yesterday. West Africa's regional bloc, the Economic Community of West African States, said today or yesterday it was easing sanctions imposed by Guinea and Mali a day after announcing a similar decision for Niger. All of them are ruled by, except for Guinea, by military juntas. Measures concerning Guinea and Mali, while decided during Saturday's emergency summit, were not mentioned during the closing speech of ECOWAS Commission Chief Omar Aliou Touré. So, well, you're going to reward the military that overthrew the government. Well, speaking of that region, Burkina Faso, a church is attacked and people murdered, at least a dozen worshippers. At least 15 people have been killed and 2 others injured in a terrorist attack on a Catholic church during Mass in Burkina Faso. Calling for police and security in Burkina Faso, the Vicar General of the Dori Diocese, Jean-Pierre Sadawogodogo, announced those who continue to wreak death and desolation in our country. We bring to your attention a terrorist attack which the Catholic community of Esakrane village was a victim of. While they were gathered for Sunday prayer, the provisional toll was 15 killed and 2 wounded. Once again, Christians under attack by fanatics in West Africa and nothing done about it. Tunisia's former president, Monsef Marzouki, is sentenced to 8 years in absentia. According to Tunisia, sentenced former President Monsef Marzouki to 8 years in prison in absentia as part of the country's crackdown on opponents of corrupt fascist Kais Saied. The charge against Marzouki, who lives in Paris, stemmed from remarks that he made that authorities said violated laws against incitement and calling for the overthrow of the government. Yeah. Well, he won't be going back to Tunisia anytime soon. He's not going to be serving 8 years in prison because of a fascist who overthrew a legitimate government with dissolving parliament. The Palestinian Authority has resigned, except for the one clown in charge. Yep, Mahmoud Abbas does not step down. Palestinian Authority government resigns, yielding to international pressure, but it falls short of President Mahmoud Abbas stepping aside. Palestinian Authority's government resigned today, an early step towards overhauls for U.S. and Middle Eastern powers see as a condition for the body to take charge of Gaza after the war. The move falls short of changes in Western and Arab governments that pressure the Palestinian Authority to make, including replacing longtime career politicians with a technocratic team, and for Mahmoud Abbas to step aside and invest in new prime minister with some of the president's powers. U.S. has called for a reformed Palestinian Authority, which currently governs Palestinian population centers in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, semi-autonomously. That is actually Wall Street Journal Judea. Let me correct the Wall Street Journal journalists who are leftist mouthpieces. Judea, not occupied West Bank. Yep. To administer Gaza post-war. But Netanyahu does not want Gaza being administered by the Palestinian Authority. It's proven to be feckless. The Chinese Communist Party arrested more than 1,000 Tibetans. This colonial power, China, which stole the sovereignty of Tibet 6 decades ago. Yep, after protests against dam construction, they further destroy the homeland of Tibetans. State Department is expressing concerns about recent mass arrests of Tibetans in China after the Chinese Communist Party launched a sweeping crackdown against ethnic group over their peaceful protest against the construction of a hydropower dam. More than 1,000 Tibetans, including monks, were arrested in China on Friday, according to a rights group. The current status of those arrested is unknown. Deeply concerned by reports the PRC's mass arrests of Tibetans protesting construction of a dam that threatens displacement of villages and destruction of monasteries. China must respect human rights and freedom of expression, including Tibetans, and the development and implementation of water and land management policies. And in breaking news, ladies and gentlemen, the African National Congress, not concerned about human rights, not concerned about genocide, not concerned about the suffering of people of color. The African National Congress today has issued no statement on the mass arrest of Tibetans by the Chinese Communist government. The ANC has nothing to say. We go now to the spokesman, Dumas Dummas, from the ANC. Take it away, Dumas Dummas. We are appalled at the genocidal behavior of the Jews in Israel, and we will not tolerate this. We're going to the International Court of Justice. Dumas Dummas, question for you. What about the Tibetans who were arrested in a mass protest? Over 1,000 reportedly by the press. No. We can't say anything about our paymasters in Beijing. Once again, the ANC hypocrites silent on the arrest of Tibetans in China by the Chinese communists and continuing to be silent on the genocide of Rohingya in Myanmar, as well as the genocide of Uyghurs in China. Denmark closes their investigation into the Nord Stream blast, saying there's not enough grounds for a criminal case. Are you high? Are you high? Denmark today joined Sweden in closing investigation into the 2022 explosions that damaged Nord Stream gas pipelines, with authorities saying they concluded there was deliberate sabotage, but not sufficient grounds to pursue a criminal case. So how can you determine there was sabotage, but there isn't a basis to go forward? Sabotage is a criminal act. And of course, we know why they're not doing this, because it's likely to be Sleepy Joe's CIA, according to a lot of conspiracy theorists who blew up the pipeline. I don't know who blew up the pipeline, but I do know this. The German government is still investigating. They have not closed the case, but Sweden and Denmark have, covering up. Now, actually, what they had to say was comical. Let me go back to where they said this. They said that, the Swedes said that they have a fairly good idea of who was behind the Nord Stream pipeline blowup, but they have no jurisdiction over those to whom they wanted to talk to. Americans? Brits? Russians? French? Who is it they don't have jurisdiction over? Zelensky claims that only 31,000 troops have been killed in the 2-year war in Ukraine. 31,000. That's about as believable as Joe Biden is sentient. Yep, not even remotely true. Around 31,000 Ukrainian troops have been killed since Russia launched its invasion, according to the grifter-in-chief Volodymyr Zelensky, hiding the scale of Ukraine's sacrifice ahead of a decisive vote in Congress on aid to the corrupt Ukraine. Every such loss is a great loss to us. It was the first time Zelensky had offered a figure for Ukraine's war losses. But, of course, we know that figure is ridiculously low. It's at least 50 to 80,000 Ukrainian troops have died in this conflict. At least. Well, farmers are tearing up the European Union left and right. Protest. Angry farmers clash with police in Brussels in a fresh show of force. Farmers clashed with police in Belgium on Monday, spraying officers with liquid manure and setting fire to piles of tires in a fresh... Oh, they're taking a page from the ANC. Farmers in Brussels are taking a page from the African National Congress in lighting fires to protest. There you go. That's good for the environment, I'm sure. Brussels said that 900 tractors had entered the city, many bearing down on the European Council building where the ministers were meeting. Smoke drifted through the air where police in riot gear used water cans to defend the EU headquarters from behind concrete barriers and barbed wire. The farmers are angry at red tape and competition from cheap imports from countries where the EU's relatively high standards do not have to be met. They lined up scores of tractors down main roads leading to the city's European quarters, snarling traffic and blocking public transport. Yes, the European Union dealing with farmers who are angry over the European Union's behavior. Well, in neighboring France, not Belgium, farmers are pissed off there as well, ladies and gentlemen. At the annual show where the French countryside comes to the capital, President Emmanuel Macron's efforts to calm a month-long confrontation were met with anger. Farmers clashed with police and Macron at the Paris Agricultural Fair. French farmers vented their fury at Emmanuel Macron on Saturday as he arrived at the annual agriculture show. A large crowd that had camped outside the night before broke in and scuffled with police officers in riot gear while Macron entered from a side door to meet with unions demanding an end to hardships in the industry. Wow. The rowdy confrontation was the latest in the month-long showdown that has seen farmers blockade roads around France and in Paris, a movement that has spread to other countries, including Greece, Poland, Belgium, and Germany. Agriculture accounts for about 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. European Union says a drastic change is required. No, it's not. The greenhouse gas emissions coming out of the mouths of European politicians is what needs to stop the carbon pollution coming from them. Polish farmers block a highway at the border crossing with Germany. Polish farmers protesting against European Union regulations and cheap food imports from Ukraine blocked the A2 highway at a border crossing with Germany on Monday. Farmers across Europe have been protesting for weeks as constraints placed on them by the European Union to tackle climate change as well as rising costs to say unfair competition from outside the EU. Polish farmers plan to block the Swico crossing with Germany until early afternoon. As far as I know, there are also German farmers on the German side. The crossing is blocked from both sides. Show of common solidarity that both Polish and German farmers will not allow these goods from Ukraine to continue to enter the European market. It's a common cause. What are they talking about? Well, Ukrainians are pissed off because Polish farmers dumped 160 tons of Ukrainian produce from train wagons to protest unfair competition. My goodness, things are hotting up in Europe, folks. Ukraine has called on Poland to punish those responsible for destroying 160 tons of Ukrainian grain in an attack at a Polish railway station. Now, I do not condone lawlessness, but I understand where the farmers are coming from. Those who damage Ukrainian grain must be found, neutralized, and punished. Ooh, punished, Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Oleksandr Kubrakov said on Twitter. Oleksandr Kubrakov is calling for the neutralization of European farmers. Wow. Now, this is the country that we're giving massive financial aid to prop up its economy for a dancing penis piano playing fraud known as Volodymyr Zelensky, masquerading as the president of an independent Ukraine. This is the country we give our money to. They're calling for the neutralization of farmers. What do you call that, folks? To me, that's murder. That's what they're looking for. Well, Porsche's electric vehicle, the Taycan is in the crapper, ladies and gentlemen. This outrageously overpriced luxury item for self-pontificating, chest-puffing leftist liberals is a piece of crap. Well, at least according to the resale market, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. In just 4 years, a Taycan turbo high-performance German electric vehicle is depreciated to virtually nothing. Depreciation is hitting electric vehicles harder than most other vehicles because they're crap. A combination of technology upgrades, price fluctuations on new cars, and lack of demand has meant a rapid drop in the value for many electric models. This phenomenon is especially dramatic for Porsche's Taycan EV, with a high-spec turbo models losing $100,000 in value within 4 years. The Porsche Taycan, first introduced in 2019, was to be the German automaker's attempt to take on super popular Tesla Model S. While the Taycan offered solid build quality and driving experience that you would expect from the maker of some legendary sports cars, the EV model was expensive. Porsche decided to launch the model with a top-of-the-range model, Turbo and Turbo S versions starting at $151,000 and $185,000 respectively. That's before you start checking off all the options. Porsche later expanded the model range to include more reasonably priced models from base Taycan to the 4S and the GTS trims. There's an updated Taycan on its way for a 2025 that will provide even more power and faster charging for just $101,000. But the Taycan is dropping like a rock. It's certified 2020 turbo with just under 15,000 miles and a current asking price of $90,000, down from $179,000. That's a $90,000 drop in value in just 4 years. Less than 15,000 miles, 22,000 kilometers. Switzerland calls on the United Nations to interfere with our planet through space-based and atmospheric alterations. The hubris of human beings is beyond comprehension, ladies and gentlemen. Switzerland calls the UN to explore the possibility of solar geoengineering. Yeah, that can't go wrong. Proposal focuses on technique that fills the atmosphere with particles, reflecting part of the sun's heat and light back into space, leading to no doubt a global ice age. Switzerland has initiated global debate on whether the risk, benefits, and uncertainties of dimming the sun should be studied by the United Nations. It's proposing that the world body should gather information about ongoing research into solar geoengineering. Stop messing with the planet, you arrogant leftists. Well, sad news, folks. Actor Kenneth Mitchell, who starred in popular shows like Jericho and most recently the woke version of Star Trek Discovery, Kenneth Mitchell, the 49-year-old Canadian actor who was diagnosed a couple years ago with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, has passed away. Canadian actor Kenneth Mitchell continued working after his ALS diagnosis, is dead at the age of 49. He appeared in Jericho and The Old Man and a big screen in Miracle and as Captain Marvel. Toronto actor Kenneth Mitchell found consistent work in television and film even after a 2018 diagnosis of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis has died. For 5.5 years, he faced a series of awful challenges from ALS, and in truest Ken fashion, he managed to rise above each one with grace and commitment to living a full and joyous life in each moment. He lived by the principles that each day is a gift and we will never walk alone. After experiencing health problems and wondering if he shared his mother's diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, he was told in 2018 he suffered from ALS. A year following his diagnosis, he was using a wheelchair. In Star Trek Discovery, he portrayed Orello, a scientist who uses a hovercraft wheelchair. In the Hulu series, The Old Man, starring Jeff Bridges and John Lithgow, he played FBI agent. He used a wheelchair. Sad to see him gone. Originally, he wasn't going to be an actor, but I remember him from Jericho and from other programs. Very talented actor. Well, the Koch network has pulled the funding for Nikki Haley. That's right. They are stopped wasting their money. Yep, after her loss in South Carolina. Americans for Prosperity, a conservative network that has been backing Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley, has announced it will no longer donate to her campaign. In a memo yesterday, Americans for Prosperity CEO Emily Seidel wrote that the group's political arm needs to reevaluate where it's spending its money after Ms. Haley lost in her home state of South Carolina. She's made it clear she'll continue to fight, and we wholeheartedly support her in this effort. But given the challenges in the primary states ahead, we don't believe any outside group can make a material difference to widen her path to victory. Of course, this group is led by billionaire Charles Koch of the Koch brothers. Now they're going to focus on down ballot elections after getting the comeuppance from the Trump camp. I'm sure that the Koch brothers are upset about that. Supreme Court has decided to hear arguments today on the laws passed by Texas and Florida to make social media companies accountable for their censorship and collusion with the federal government. Supreme Court to weigh constitutionality of laws regulating social media giants. Supreme Court is hearing oral arguments today in two big social media cases that could have wide-reaching implications for how companies like Facebook can moderate or censor content. The two cases are Moody versus NetChoice and NetChoice versus Paxton are coming before the court in disputes over Texas and Florida's social media laws. The state's attempts to rein in big tech laid out many parameters for how companies could remove content they found objectionable. Now, the problem with all this, ladies and gentlemen, is not that companies can remove content. That's their prerogative. They're a private organization. That shouldn't even be an issue here. But the problem is that it has been proven, courtesy of Elon Musk, that the federal government violated the First Amendment by using social media companies as agents of the federal government illegally, unconstitutionally, and they used them to censor content that the government didn't want people to see or hear. Now, that's unconstitutional. That is a crime. Not a single official in the Trump or Biden regime has ever been charged with violating the First Amendment and censoring Americans using third-party agents to do so. And it is time for the Supreme Court to step in and make a decision on this. Well, the useless, feckless loser, Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, is finally stepping down after destroying the Republican Party the past several years. Critics are growing increasingly frustrated with the party's lackluster fundraising and its preparations for the general election. Longtime leader of the Republican National Committee confirmed that she's leaving her post before the election as the party faces cash crunch. Ronna McDaniel, who was elected in 2017 after running Trump's campaign in 2016, will step down. She said, "It's been the honor and privilege of my life to serve and destroy the Republican Party. I've decided to step aside at our spring training in March 8th in Houston to allow our nominee to select a chair of their choosing. The Republican National Committee has historically undergone a change once we have a nominee. It's always been my intention to honor that tradition. I remain committed to winning back the White House and electing Republicans up and down the ballot in November." She won her fourth term in 2023 and expected to remain in the job until 2025, but she faced a groundswell of criticism from grassroots in the Republican Party. Which Trump eventually jumped on the bandwagon like he always does, and then people claim it's a MAGA movement when it had nothing to do with Trump. It had to do with us. A Air Force service member, airman, who self-immolates himself in front of the Israeli embassy is a lunatic and has died in hospital after his idiotic decision to do this. Now, media reports of him as being an Air Force officer are fraudulent. It's not true. He's not an officer of any sort whatsoever, not even a non-commissioned officer. He is an airman, a private in the Air Force, and he's dead now because of his stupidity. Air Force service member dies after setting himself ablaze outside Israeli embassy. An Air Force service member died after setting himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, an apparent act of political protest against the war in Gaza. The airman involved in yesterday's incident succumbed to his injuries and passed away last night, Air Force spokeswoman Ann Stefanik said in a statement to the Washington Times. 25-year-old airman Aaron Bushnell of San Antonio, Texas, died from his injuries. The video showed in the Times showed the airman in uniform approaching the embassy on International Drive in Washington, D.C. In the video, he identified himself, confirmed he was in the Air Force, and said, "We will no longer be complicit in genocide. I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all." Okay, you moron. Good riddance to you. Colonizers? There are no Jews or Christians in Gaza. It was abandoned in 2005 and left to the Palestinians. So what a moron. He gives up his life for stupidity. Haunting final post of airman who set himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy. You're doing right now. Not really. Yep, he penned a Facebook post about standing against injustice early Sunday before his horrific self-immolation while repeatedly crying out, "Free Palestine." Well, why is this happening? We have MMR vaccinations, measles, mumps, and rubella, but there is an outbreak of measles in Florida. An 8th case has appeared in the first child under age 5. Follows the state's controversial Surgeon General's decision to let parents decide whether to quarantine children or keep them in school. Florida measles outbreak is expanding. As of Monday, officials in Broward County confirmed an 8th case of the virus. It's unknown what connection the youngest measles patient has to the Manatee Bay Elementary School in Weston near Fort Lauderdale. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported that as of Friday, there have been at least 35 measles cases in 15 states in 2024, most related to international travel. In January, there were 9 measles cases in Pennsylvania, 8 of them in Philadelphia. Of course, this is a consequence of criminal alien migration into the United States, and obviously people who have not vaccinated their children for measles, mumps, or rubella. So a combination of stupidity and a combination of criminal lawlessness are undermining the health and safety of our nation. Dartmouth, Northwestern, and Rice, elite universities colluded to fix prices to drive up the cost of university education. And, of course, knowing this, the Biden regime illegally forgives student loans. How about you go after these universities? Well, somebody did. Dartmouth, Northwestern, Rice, and Vanderbilt agreed to a $166 million settlement in a price fixing. 10 out of 17 universities accused of the lawsuit have now accepted to pay and settle the matter. 4 universities have agreed to settle a class action lawsuit that accused them of engaging in price fixing admissions fees and reducing financial aid to poor students. Settlement came as part of a 2022 antitrust lawsuit filed by several former students and parents against 17 universities. The complaint alleged universities violated U.S. antitrust laws by considering a student's ability to pay tuition fees when they shouldn't. It accused the institutions of reducing or limiting financial aid provided to students from lower and middle-income families, and universities are also charged with inflating tuition costs for students receiving financial aid. Dartmouth, Northwestern, Rice, and Vanderbilt agreed to pay $166 million. Dartmouth and Rice will contribute $33.75 million, Northwestern $43.5 million, and Vanderbilt $55 million. And what is common amongst all those schools? They're all private institutions who colluded to screw aspiring university students. Well, remember the AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile cell phone outage earlier this past week? Well, AT&T is apologizing to customers and offering them a whopping $5. $5 AT&T is offering its customers over the outage. Everyone's talking about how cheap AT&T is. AT&T is sorry for its recent outage. It left some customers without service for up to 12 hours. To make up for it, they will give those affected a $5 credit. The company announced its intentions to make it right with customers affected by the outage. According to the support page, the $5 credit is on per account basis, meaning customers with multiple lines will only receive $5. And they'll do it over the next 2 billing cycles. What a bunch of cheapskates. In the interest of full disclosure, I am a shareholder of AT&T. I have a small number of shares that I've had for over 30 years. What a bunch of cheapskates. Well, Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. Now, Starbucks has a big competitor in Dunkin' Donuts. First it was McDonald's, which started with McCafe, which put pressure on Starbucks, and people said Starbucks would fall from the top spot. Didn't happen. McCafe did well for McDonald's, but it did not dethrone Starbucks as the country's coffee purveyor. Then it was Dunkin' Donuts. People said Dunkin' Donuts is going to outdo Starbucks, and they've done quite well, but they've not outdone Starbucks. Now, a third competitor, Dutch Brothers, a company started back in the 1990s and a rapidly growing company in Oregon. The regional coffee chain Dutch Brothers is ready to give national brands a run for their money, according to the story in Quartz. In 2023, it became abundantly clear that Dutch Brothers was on the rise. The coffee chain achieved system-wide sales of $1.2 billion, 28.9% increase over the previous year. They went public that year and flashed forward to the close of 2023, and they're reporting system-wide sales of $1.4 billion, and same-store sales are up 5% for the fourth quarter. This looks very much like the same story of Starbucks back in the day in the 90s and 2000s when it did the same thing. Of course, Starbucks was founded in 1971, but didn't take off globally and nationwide and globally until the 1990s and then 2000s. So is Dutch Brothers on the verge of becoming the next one to supplant Starbucks? Highly unlikely. The number of stores is not even remotely in comparison. Dutch Brothers ended with 831 locations last year, 831 locations. Starbucks has 16,000 locations in the United States alone, not to mention at Menlyn Mall and in Cape Town and elsewhere around South Africa. 16,000 locations in America, and these guys have 831. But what it does mean for those investing is if the company is well run, if they're smart about their expansion, and the coffee craze continues, which is highly likely because of the addictive nature of caffeine, then this might be an investment opportunity for those looking at it. By the way, the stock is at one of the lowest prices it's been since it was introduced 2 years ago. Lisa Hochstein, one of these ridiculous fake celebrities who's all implants and nails and lashes and makeup and all this garbage. She was on the Real Housewives of some idiotic city. I don't know. I don't watch this stuff, but this story I saw being reported. Lisa Holstein is being roasted for digitally removing her husband, who she's estranged from photographs. So Lisa Holstein roasted for botched Photoshop job to remove estranged husband Lenny from a family photo. And there's the photograph. You can see the dude's shoes, and you can see his outline. He looks like an apparition. Look at this. Look at this. She erased her husband from the picture. She sent a clear message when she posted a photo with estranged husband Lenny Holstein edited out. Fans roasted for blurring Lenny out of the photo with her mom and son. Wow. Yep. And then somebody said, I love how you erased Lenny. The all lipstick, Botox, and implants. Lisa's followers flooded the comment section with a post to call out the messy editing job. Why didn't you just crop him out? I didn't want to distort the picture, she said. Visually, it looks better that we're centered. Oh, my goodness. They filed for divorce in May 2022 after 12 years of marriage. There she is with her kids. And Lenny now, he cheated on her. He's with his new fiancée, Katarina Mazepa. Again, all implants, Botox, and makeup, fake nails. Lenny called the abuse allegations egregious and fired back by suing her for defamation. He also accused her of being abusive toward him, claiming she yelled at him on a weekly basis, which he vehemently denied. Well, guess what? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. You people are ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Nobody cares. Thanks to 102 people here right now. Hey, folks, be sure to hit that like button if you don't mind. Please press that like button.
That was easy.
And join us right here at the channel. If you're not a subscriber, you can jump in and join the chat. Subscribers get the chat. And members, we do things for members periodically too. Excuse me. So there you go, folks. That's the news for today, Monday, the 26th of February, 2024. Jacob Zuma's MK party in a bit of trouble here as Zuma runs his mouth about imprisoning black girls on Robben Island because they're pregnant. He doesn't address the men who sleep with them, the boys who sleep with them, those who rape them, those who molest them, the parents who engage in dipping their wick in their own children. Not even something that Jacob Zuma talks about. So isn't that fascinating? Fascinating to say how Jacob Zuma blames it all on girls. Billy Pater says Starbucks is gross. I don't know about that. Gus says, just report on Air Force member who set himself on fire, Ronaldo. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. Over 150 people caught by these YouTube deepfake Elon Musk ads. One person is committed to... What are you talking about? What deepfake ads? What is this? Does saved hundreds mean saving a few cents? I don't know what that means. AT&T is a con artist company. I refuse to pay what they think I owe them. Oh, why did you have DirecTV? Oh, there's Ronaldo. Also, congrats for standing in office. You have my mail-in ballot vote. Well, thank you for that, Ronaldo. Oh, yeah, I just talked about that. Yep, I talked about that a few moments ago. Ronaldo just joined here late. Ronaldo, you're not on today. So, yeah, for those who don't know, first off, if you're excited about things, calm down. It's okay. Keep calm and praat Afrikaans. Maar ek praat nie Afrikaans nie, eh? Just calm down and praat Afrikaans, folks. But for those who don't know, I have filed to run for state legislature, which is the equivalent of an MEC, a member of the provincial legislature in South Africa. So it'd be like running for Western Cape or KZN or Eastern Cape. And if I get elected. But I got fierce competition, lots of candidates. I'm not particularly well known, so I'm not sure how it's going to go. But there is my campaign logo, which is kind of cool. They did a great job, and I'm waiting to hear back from the folks that are working with me on my campaign material. Let's see if they've responded back. Nope. What's this? Oh, no. Carly Rae Jepsen's going to be playing at the Nationals this year. Wow. Okay. All right, so Ronaldo's there. Good to see Ronaldo. I saw a photo of that Air Force soldier on fire. Yeah, I saw it too, but I didn't want to show it on air. Social engineering at its finest, yes. Problem with rechargeable batteries. They're only, lithium is a backup. Saved hundreds. Oh, that's what the question was. Peter Murray's here. Welcome, Peter. Daniel Hook. Ken Aronston. Ultra Bridge, ignore Microsoft updates until I see whether anyone around me suddenly has problems. But you can't. Microsoft, I've turned off Microsoft updates. I've not authorized it, and it continually updates and reboots my machine without my permission. I can ignore it, but eventually it does it. 12D simultaneously. I don't know what that's about. CAD, computer-aided design. Probably more to do with installing a recent Microsoft update. What's going on there? Email Ferret, welcome to you. Kurtz Verhova, Gavin Comer, John Jarvis. Enough of the racism stuff. Well, I agree, Jarvis, and it was all cynicism, sarcasm. Must have gone to Durham Christmas holidays. Okay, what else is going on? Pinelands. Okay, that's where I was at before. All right, so there we go. I think we're caught up with the chat now. Hello to Ronaldo. How's it going, Ronaldo? What are you up to, man? You can do it. It's electric. Boogie, woogie, woogie. Yeah, that's right. The electric slide minister, Josecento Rabacopa. He is the electricity minister for South Africa, and he's in the news twice today. One's saying that things are better because the state has loaned us money and we've brought production back in line. And then shortly afterwards has to apologize for losing 3 gigawatts of power at the Kendall power station. I love it. Did anybody watch my video? Not a lot of people did. I did a video yesterday about Zuma says we'll use African law. I mean, I thought that was pretty good, but only 1,600 people watched it. That kind of sucks. I'm kind of bummed out about that, folks. Let me get there. Let me put this on mute in case. Oh, it's giving me a Discover credit card ad. Oh, I'm getting an ad. I'll make a half a penny or a quarter penny off that probably. But here is. Come on. Let me get to this. I'm going to, once this ad finishes playing, can I skip it now? I can skip it. Okay, cool beans. So here you go. This was my video I put up yesterday. For those who haven't watched it, please go watch it when we're done here. I won't show you all of it. I'll just show you the beginning of it. It's kind of cool. I thought it was kind of cool. So here we go. Hello, folks. Welcome back to Chris Wyatt Reports. Breaking news out of the Eastern Cape province of Democratic South Africa. Former President Jacob Zuma, the terminally ill octogenarian leader of the new opposition party Umkhonto we Sizwe, or Spear the Nation, has seemingly made a full recovery from his shake shibiritis. Now, few outside South Africa have ever heard of this mysterious illness, which seems to only strike people convicted of serious crimes and exclusively in South Africa. Traditional healers, in consultation with settler medical practitioners, have remarked at the astounding recovery of the man too sick to stay in escort prison. Medical experts say it reminds them of the elderly man's once cocky financial advisor, who also made a remarkable return to good health after having been diagnosed with just 90 days to live back when he was released from prison over a decade ago. But seriously, Jacob Zuma's upstart MK party is rattling some cages with the smooth talking. There you go, folks. That's the one I did last night. A very depressingly low number of views. I'm kind of sad about that. Oh, and 6 people just left when I showed that. I guess they don't like me dissing on Jacob Zuma. Anyway, what's the equivalent of a ward councilor in USA? City councilor or alderman in some cities, older cities like Chicago and I think Boston are called aldermen. It's just a council member, city council member. We don't have ward councilors. Yeah, we have wards in those cities, but they're not called ward councilors. I did. African law, make it up as you go. Yep. The way you say boogie woogie woogie reminds me of a weed song. There's a deep fake on YouTube using Elon Musk likeness and a voice saying you can invest 4,700 Rand and get 12,000 as a salary. It's a scam. Well, I appreciate that, Joking Atheist. Thanks for pointing it out. But folks, stop being gullible. Who in their right mind thinks you can take 5,000 Rand and turn it into 12,000 Rand? This isn't alchemy. We're not turning, stone into gold. It doesn't work. If you had a dog to make appearances, what type of breed would you have? I have never thought about that. I'm not a big fan of dogs. Maybe a little tiny one. That way I can pick it up and put it here on the table, something small. Yeah. My neighbor has a really cool dog who's super friendly. His name is Cooper. And he's a really cool dog. But I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that. No, I don't want a boxer. No, I think boxers are ugly. Ooh, Ronaldo, if he's still here, we'll hear about that in a second. Keep calm and use the force. You're late. I signed that form. Tried Tyler's guilty. What? German Shepherd, says Vilma. I like German Shepherds, but I had a German Shepherd that was kind of a cinnamon colored. Let me see if I can find that. If I have a picture of CT. I think I have one picture of her from my childhood. Let me take a look here very quickly here. Let me see. That's not what I want. I want this. Go to Google Photos and see what we can find here. Google Photos. Got to pick the correct account from my multiple Google accounts. It's going to be this one. So let me see. Okay. Okay. Do I have a picture of my dog? I think I do. I'm looking here. I'm not seeing it. Come on, come on, come on, come on. There she is. There she is. Wow, that's pretty small to see. So let me see if I can blow that up. Okay. Oh, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. I want to zoom in on this thing. There you go. Okay, so this was my German Shepherd when I grew up. Woo, boy, the thing is big. All right, here we go. So I'm going to show you my German Shepherd. What's going on here? All right, there we go. Yeah, some people are desperate, and it overrides common sense. You're correct, and that happens the same thing with relationships. People get crazy. So here is my German Shepherd. There she is, CT. Called her CT for Cinnamon Toast. That was my best dog ever. Yeah, I love that dog. She was brilliant. It's the only picture I have of her. Only picture I have. She used to sleep on my bed. Yep. It was in high school. Yep. CT, Cinnamon Toast. So that's the last time I had a dog. Let me reduce the size of this now back to 100%. There we go. All right. Somewhere I've got that Polaroid. I'm not sure where. Okay. Got it. Cool beans. Okay. Back here now. Best dog was a Roddy. Okay. Achilles threatens Zuma if they lose the elections. Really? I hadn't seen that, Ma Baker. Okay. Yeah, some people are desperate, and it overrides common sense. That is true. One reporting it was caught herself, and she's an advocate. Yeah, no, I mean, look, when people are vulnerable and they find themselves in a tough position, at times they succumb to these sort of things. We are all at risk, and no one should be arrogant and think they can avoid it, and I'm not either. You know, I'm pretty astute, and I've seen some pretty crazy things. Dogs are great. Okay, says Joking Atheist. Okay. All right, Justin is getting a Swiss Shepherd. I don't know what a Swiss Shepherd is. Maybe Jay-Z's health treatment in Russia was a smokescreen for some other agenda playing. Maybe, Johan, no, I don't know. I don't know. You have the crud. No, I've had the crud since the first week of December, Billy Painter. I've had mucus issues since then. Nope. No news on the cough. I went to doctors. They gave me Mucinex to help, and it's helped a bit, but still there. Not going away. Not going away. It's not really a cough. It's just mucus. My lungs are producing mucus. I don't know why. So, anyway. It does suck. Yep. But it's not like it was when it started. It was really, really bad. Black Great Dane. I hadn't seen those Great Danes. Anyway. But those who've watched my video from yesterday, thank you for it. It's just a handful of people, unfortunately. It's done well than a lot of videos of late, but still not great. 1,700 views. Picked up 9 subscribers. Thanks for that. That's pretty cool. Yeah, 1,900, excuse me. It's gone up a little bit now, 1,878. So it's not doing great, but it's doing okay. By the way, yesterday I almost set a record for my solar panels here in central Pennsylvania in February, no doubt. Of course, I put it in November, so it's likely to do that. But now sitting at 9.1. That's better than yesterday at this time. But yesterday I hit 36.1 kilowatt hours. The day before was 31. So 36, 5 more. So we'll see how it goes today. Pretty cool. And for the month of February, 617 kilowatt hours. So that's 938 for the year so far. Reaching close by the end of the month. We've got 26, 27, 28, 29. 3 more days. If I could get 30 per day, that would take me over a megabyte in January and February. That would be so cool. Yep. All right. What else we got here? German Shepherd lover, says Erica. Okay. Dogs are great. What's this? Chris Bond is post 10 seconds. Donate 1 million to EFF. Ha. Yeah, well, I don't have control of that. By the time that your slow internet connection from your crappy internet connection in South Africa actually makes it across the Atlantic and into YouTube servers and then translates to me, even if I'm watching it come, it won't be in 10 seconds. That's a fake effort by Ronaldo there. It's not something in the air pollutant. What's this? No, it's not. Lots of people had this. I've run into people all over central Pennsylvania. Got it. It's the latest Chinese pestilence. My cat scratched up my cousin's Rhodesian Ridgeback. Ooh. Wow. Make your little mouse run faster, says. Oh, a white... Okay, gotcha. Okay. As a service dog. Okay. Oh, for you? A service dog for you? Wow, that'd be pretty cool. All right. African Idiots asking for my comments on Colonel Douglas McGregor. Why are people always asking for my comments on Douglas McGregor? Why don't the people watch Douglas McGregor watch my program? You know, look, I've talked about McGregor. Smart guy, but a lot of people are calling into question his comments on the Ukraine conflict. I'm not. I don't really pay much attention to him. I usually hear about it after people tell me, and then I go, look, got Douglas McGregor. McGregor, of course, is known for a book he wrote when he was a major back at the Command General Staff College, and it was called Breaking the Phalanx. And it was about how the Army was structured improperly for the 21st century, and there was some truth to it. Anyway, it's a plan that the Army never adopted. It wanted our Army to look much more like the British military, which is regimental based, and so have regimental combat teams rather than have divisions, which are much larger. The problem with that, of course, is that there is no British military. It's a joke. It's completely evaporated. You know, I think the EFF Teletubbies could probably show up and outmaneuver the British military. I'm being very harsh, but there's very little left of the once proud British military. It's been destroyed by leftists and fake conservatives in the Tory party over the past decades. Today, it claims they're spending 2% of their GDP on national defense, which is a pure fiction and lie. They are paying the retirement salaries of folks like John Jarvis and including that as part of their operating budget. Now, the U.S. military does the same thing, but at 3.6% of GDP, the fraction of the budget that's spent on retirements isn't what pushes us over 2%, which is the NATO agreement. Yep. Watch Douglas McGregor. He's smart but not impressed with his calling Ukraine versus Russia. No evidence presented to back his change. Yeah, well, Charles, yeah. I'm of the same opinion. He's just made claims that, now my predictions on there, I would argue, now I don't make predictions about Ukraine nearly as often as Douglas McGregor, but I would argue that pretty much everything I've said about that conflict is still, you know, let me see. Let me see if I can find this. 43. Okay, let me see if I can find it. Got to go back to 2022. Russia, okay. There it is, March 2nd. Let's see what this does. A couple years ago. Let's see if it gives me an ad. I don't think it'll give me an ad. No, it won't give me an ad, so let's do that. Okay, let's see. Whoops, this is what I had to say a couple years ago. Let's see what I had to say. There you go. Ah, the war leader. Still paying for that stupid website. Hello, folks, and welcome back to Chris Wyatt. What follows is a compilation of analysis and video raw footage purportedly from the Ukraine. I cannot attest to the provenance of these videos or who recorded them. They're all in the public domain, widely available on multiple social media platforms. They are available publicly. I am bringing this to you with analysis to help bring some clarity to the current conflict in the Ukraine after the Russian invasion. Today is day 7. The 2nd of March, 2022. Number of events taking place. Once again, I cannot determine the provenance or origin of these videos. Provenance. Or the veracity of them. However, after analyzing the video and knowing the events and the players involved, they appear to be roughly accurate as to what's happening here. This is the current disposition of Russian advances within the Ukraine as of today, the 2nd of March, 2022, provided by the United Kingdom's Defense Intelligence. Defense intelligence indicates that the Russians have progressed not particularly far in the eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass region, particularly in the north. They have advanced to the gates of Kiev, but yet to take Kiev a week into the invasion. You can see on this map that the Russian-controlled area in the northern part of the country is the largest, with the exception perhaps of advances from the Crimea. That was a couple years ago. We're now 2 years into this conflict. Yep. So anyway, yeah, Douglas McGregor, I don't have anything bad or good to say about him. He's a smart guy, but I really can't attest to the things he puts up. Just not something I'm all that familiar with. And day 9, And I got the annexation here. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Anyway, yep. So that's Russian. McGregor's claims may not be true, but he gives zero. Maybe true. He gives zero. I'm not sure where he's feeding him raw data. Well, I've seen some of his projections have been wildly false. But I mean, that's the nature of an analysis. I wouldn't expect him to be right all the time. Who can be right all the time? You're making an analysis in the absence of information. You don't always have all the information. So yeah. Yep. Watch Redacted, says Brian. Okay. Told by ex-UK military intelligence officer from Sandhurst that they were taught the old SATF guerrilla warfare adopted from the Boer War days. I don't know about that. We weren't taught that. We weren't taught that. We were taught Duffer's Drift. Duffer's Drift was something when I was a lieutenant we read. Duffer's Drift, yeah. If you're familiar with that. But that's Sandhurst. Duffer's. Yep, the defense of Duffer's Drift. There you go. 1904 short book about a British military officer with his lieutenant backsight forethought. Command 50 men to defend Duffer's Drift, a natural ford. Large forces of Boers, known to BF, is moving toward his position. The scenario is played out in 6 separate times in 6 different dreams. They are ignominiously defeated in the first dreams. In each defeat, they learn lessons and adapt a strategy for later encounters. The later dreams end more inconclusively. In the final dream, his team successfully hold out long enough to be relieved. Yep. Book has been imitated many times, both by the British Army and the U.S. Army, and the new adaptations continue to appear in the 21st century. The Defense of Duffer's Drift. Yep. Yep. And they got 22 lessons learned. Yep. Defense of Battle Position Duffer is a publication created by the Asymmetric Warfare Group in Johns Hopkins back in 2016 that covers how commanders may integrate the cyber domain with tactical operations at the brigade combat team level. Colonel Backsight Forethought, a student at the Army War College. Yeah, okay. Yeah, anyway, so yeah. Defense of Duffer's Drift, that's something that we were taught. So analysis by nature is gathering all the information data and correlating strands. You are correct. You are correct. That is right. But in order to do that, you have to know the background information. So, for instance, when you do analysis on what forces are going to do, you have to know their intrinsic capabilities. You have to know their intrinsic doctrine for how they maneuver, how they would position themselves, how they would be outlined. So, for instance, and I'll give you a story. This is a little war story. It's not war, but it's a war story. That's a phrase, a euphemism. So when I was a captain, or was I still lieutenant? I was still lieutenant, I think it was. I was lieutenant, and I was at Hohenfels, which is in Bavaria. It is our Combat Training Maneuver Center, CTMC. And now it's called something else. But anyway, that's where battalions would maneuver in the battle space on physical ground against an opposing force, which is a permanent force of troops stationed there. And they would use Soviet doctrine, the opposing force, and we would use U.S. doctrine, and you go on offense and defense against them. So what I did is that I was a brigade intelligence officer, and I had young soldiers who were intelligence analysts who had been poorly trained and didn't understand their craft. So I was trying to teach them. So what I did is we pulled out a map. We were given a particular point in the battle when the expectations would be the forces would be here and our forces would be here, and this would be the situation. Given that situation, what would happen? Well, knowing the rate of march, knowing the terrain, because I walked the terrain many times and also can do map reconnaissance very well, knowing the capabilities, also knowing the requirements for mutually overlapping support. What do I mean about that? Well, mutually overlapping support will be a situation in which you have forces on the ground, and the forces on the ground are moving along on the battlefield. I wish I'd had a screen up I could do this, but we'll do this here. So here's the battlefield, and the enemy is marching this direction, okay? Marching down like that. That's an arrow, a very bad one. So the enemy is marching from north to south, and then you have to have air defense capabilities, either rockets or cannons that can provide 100% coverage for your forces on the ground. So you have to find positions on movement. So units move, they stop, they set up while troops move through that area, and then other ones jump forward. So you have to have mutual overlapping. So the circles, so that you have no gaps in air defense, and that would cover the whole battlefield. So what I did, knowing the capabilities of the 2S6 and all the other air defense systems that were available to the opposition forces, knowing where they could actually place them on the ground, because the roads and trails and networks and, you know, obstacles like hills and things, and get the radars out, I took acetate over the map, laid out the enemy forces at a particular point in the battle, and then we marched along as they went. And I put down all the positions where the air defense would be at a particular time. So we take the battle minus an hour, minus 2 hours, plus an hour, plus 3 hours. Anyway, so they took the information that I said, the grid coordinates and the times that those air defense systems would be in those positions based on this movement to contact march of the enemy to meet our forces. They put it in the computer. And I destroyed 100% of the enemy air defense. So the outcome of that was the observer controllers who oversee the training and evaluate the performance of the units came back to, now we weren't in the maneuver space. We were just a brigade providing the resources to the battalion that was in there at 4-7 Cap. The observer controllers came back and said that I cheated. We had an after action report and they accused me of cheating. To which my commander went bat crap crazy. Colonel Stephen Cook said, "What are you talking about? He cheated. You watched him make these templates. How could he possibly cheat?" Because the observer controllers were there when I was making the templates and training my soldiers on how to do it. And then they had the audacity to claim that I cheated because we got all the air defense. And he went off on them. He was a full colonel. I was a lieutenant. And he said, "Cheated? How? How? Did he enter your computer and put the data in?" "No, you put the data in that he gave you based on his analysis." He said, "What you're seeing here is a brilliant intelligence officer, a brilliant young intelligence officer who knows his craft." Well, in the end, they adjudicated and said, well, it would have been impossible to take out 100%. And I agree. It would have been impossible because I couldn't have got the timing right, but just happened to be lucky in some respects. So they took out 50% of the enemy air defense. So there you go. That's what you do when you have, in the absence of information. Now, I didn't have the overlays from the enemy forces, where they were going to march, when they were going to march, what air defense they're going to put up, but I knew the capabilities of the air defense. I knew the terrain. I knew the opposing force. I knew our forces, and I knew what had to be done. And in order for them to have, doctrinally, the mutually overlapping and supporting fires that they need to protect their forces, they had to do, because there's only so many places they could go. And I got it right. That's what an intelligence analyst does. And I want to thank Stephen Cook, my brigade commander, who had nothing but great confidence in me, and I served him well. And he was a great commander and a great leader. I learned an awful lot from him for his confidence in me as a young lieutenant. Yep. Anyway. Am I going to shoot you down over Harrisburg? With what, a drone? My drone can't carry anything. It'd be too heavy. All it does is take pictures. I'm in Cape Town. Still don't like this stupid undersized airport. What are you doing in Cape Town? Yes, Ken, it did sound like sour grapes. It was. And my boss just called him out on it because they could have gotten away with it. I was a lieutenant, and they were captains and majors, and they were browbeating me. And I can't argue. I can't argue with them. So I was just kind of bummed out. And then my boss said, no. You're seeing a very talented young intelligence officer, and this is a good job on his part. Yep. What is this? Russia does not want to what? What is a fig jam, Alter Bridge? While he was studying, and I had to put it in practice, good old days as conscript. Okay, what is going on over there? Crocotopia says. Okay. Please send your boat a heads up. His wife just came out, kidney surgery in Frankfurt. Do not drop my name. That's appreciated. Okay, I don't know who we've been talking about, so best of luck to the wife coming out of surgery. Sorry to hear about that. Charles is saying, joking atheist, based on Douglas McGregor's analysis, there's no Ukrainian forces left, yet Russia still has not overwhelmed the Ukrainians. Yeah. Very high tech you have there, Colonel. What do you mean, RJ? What, my analysis I just did there? That's just doing it the old-fashioned way. That's just knowing the capabilities and going from there. Yep. I'm at 10.3 kilowatt hours now. Woohoo, that's a good start. But get a bit of clouds now. It's only at 4.75 generating. Having a great boss is crucial for a successful career. Did you ever work on... No. I didn't know Norman Schwarzkopf. Never met him. He was a Vietnam era guy well before my time. I just served under him, very far under him at multiple layers of command in the Gulf War. But yeah, no, didn't know him. He's passed away. Tried to get USA Joburg flights canceled, so they gratuitously flew me to Cape Town. I didn't even know we were doing Joburg flights. I mean, I couldn't book any. The only flights I could get to South Africa were Cape Town, which is ironic because for 30 years I can only get into South Africa for the most part year-round through OR Tambo, and then suddenly it switched to Cape Town, which used to be seasonal. Alter Bridge is good. Just ask me. Oh, RJ says jabbing on my notepad. Yeah, it is pretty high tech, isn't it? Yeah. The problem Ukrainians have is they're rapidly running out of the ammunition. That's why they're so anxious to have USA supply them with said ammo. Well, that's part of the problem. They're also running out of Ukrainians that they can send to their death as well. Russia's got plenty more people they can send to their death. Yep. But it's odd that the Russians are using T-55 tanks. What the hell is that all about? Well, George, I talked about that earlier, not the shipping issues. I talked yesterday about a British flag ship, or a British ship flagged, I think, in Liberia, that was supposedly sinking yesterday. The U.S. And the U.K. apparently did attacks on dozens of Houthi locations. Tried reading Schwarzkopf's book, but I'm still struggling. I haven't. I've never read it. I read his autobiography. I've never read it. It didn't look all that interesting, but I bought it. Of course, like a lot of the books that come out, you buy things. But I didn't read it. But here's an even better book than that. More interesting. This is about the Stalingrad airlift, which was heroic by the Luftwaffe trying to supply the troops who were increasingly isolated in Stalingrad. Robert Forsyth wrote this book, To Save an Army, the Stalingrad airlift. It's pretty comprehensive and interesting. It has some dry spots in it, as some military histories do, but Stalingrad ranks as one of the most infamous, savage, and emotive battles of the 20th century. It has consumed military historians since the 1950s, has inspired many books and much debate. In To Save an Army, aviation historian Robert Forsyth tells the story of an operation mounted by the Luftwaffe to supply by air the trapped and exhausted German 6th Army at Stalingrad in the winter of 42-43. The weather conditions faced by the air crews, mechanics, and soldiers on the ground were appalling. The daily figure of 300 tons of supplies needed by the 6th Army just to subsist proved overambitious for the Luftwaffe, which battled against a lack of transport capacity, worsening serviceability, increasing losses in badly needed aircraft. However, against all odds and in the face of a resurgent and active Soviet Air Force, the transports maintained a determined presence over the ravaged city on the Volga, even when the last airfields in Stalingrad pocket had been lost. Using the diaries of Luftwaffe commanders and other previously unpublished sources, as well as a selection of rare contemporary photographs, Robert Forsyth analyzed the human, strategic, tactical, and technical elements of one of the most dramatic operations undertaken by the Luftwaffe. Robert Forsyth is an author, editor, and publisher specialized in military aviation history. He is the author of over 30 books on the aircraft, campaigns, and units of the Luftwaffe, an interest he's held since boyhood, and about which he's interviewed several former airmen. He's also written articles for many leading aviation magazines, been consulted for television on the same subject. To Save an Army is a culmination of many years of research conducted in the archives of the UK, Germany, and the US, and draws upon diaries and papers held in private collections. Yep, this book was published in 2022. Yep. So let me just read one little paragraph here for you. One of the directives stated principle was to fully wipe out the remaining Soviet military potential and as far as possible deprive them of their most important military economic sources of strength. But the stark reality was that in order for Germany to wipe out any aspect of Soviet military potential, there was a need for oil. And by early 1942, Germany's existing sources of supply were insufficient to produce the quantity needed for grand offensive operations in the East. Only some 20% of German crude oil was extracted domestically. And while synthetic fuel production had almost doubled to 4,116,000 tons in 1941 from the figure in 39, that was offset by the decline in supply from Romania's Ploiești oil fields, which had slid by 3,124,000 tons between 37 and 41. So, yeah, there you go. In the key southern sector, German forces were marshaled under Heeresgruppe Süd, commanded since January by Generalfeldmarschall Foto von Bock. This was a powerful force numbering more than 1 million German troops, plus 300,000 from countries allied, including Italy, Hungary, and Romania. Together on the eve of the offensive, the German manpower comprised 45 infantry divisions, 11 panzer divisions, 4 light infantry divisions, and 5 motorized divisions, plus a further 25 divisions drawn from an Italian, a Hungarian, and 2 Romanian armies. This was in itself a sign that Germany was struggling with the manpower demands of a front more than 2,700 kilometers in length. The Army group could field 1,495 serviceable tanks, including newer Panzer III and IV models, armed with long-barreled 50mm and 75mm guns, respectively. both capable of penetrating the armor of the Red Army's ubiquitous T-34. The Luftwaffe mustered 1,700 combat aircraft at the start of the offensive, of which 1,200 were actually operationally ready, including 350 bombers, 211 fighters, 160 Zerstörer, more than 150 Junkers, 87. Yep. So, there you go. That's a good book. So, cool stuff there anyway. The Hungarians and Italians were holding the flanks, Stalingrad. And of course that was a problem because they were just melted away and wiped out very quickly. Not very capable forces. Yep. And the Germans had many units, including SS divisions, which were full of non-Germans. You had the SS Viking division, which was full of Danes and Norwegians, Dutch, and even Swedish volunteers, a few of those. Yeah, the Viking division. And they also, I think, had Estonian battalions were attached to it, and Latvians. Hey, Dylan Comberg is here. I didn't see Dylan earlier. Okay. I mean, Russia are still using Ka-58 chopper. Sorry for screaming. Just happy to be here. Hey, good to see you, Jacques. Good to see you back there. All right, I read a book about Italians and Stalingrad. It sounded even worse for Italians and Romanians compared to Germans. Well, they also saw the Italians up on the Leningrad front, and it was bad for them there too. Yep, very, very bad for them. Yep. Okay. As far as I know, only one T-90 that got destroyed and yet to see another one. Why is Russia pumping Ukraine with seriously? I don't know, Joking Atheist. It's a good question. Why are BMP-1s out there? Why are MTLBs? Those are armored personnel carriers that are used for engineering and such. Why are MTLBs from the 1960s out there? T-55s from the 1950s out there? It doesn't make any sense. They're also their artillery, towed D-30 artillery. What the hell is that all about? I mean, that's just crazy. Yeah, the Russians, I love these analytical things where people, look, the Russians are getting wiped out. Look at them boldly trying to go across this minefield. Look how they're taken out. I mean, these people that making these videos like they're experts on military tactics. They don't even know what they're talking about here. They are entertaining. They get millions of views and good for them, but I'm not going to do that nonsense. Yeah, so they're all propagandists getting this information fed to them directly by Ukrainians from their drones and such. Look at the Russians, how they come across. And it's just all nonsense. And then they mislead people and make false statements and give the impression this, that, and the other is happening. Look, the Russian military is not impressive. I'll tell you that much. If it wasn't for nuclear weapons, Russia would not be a threat. Not to us. They have nothing to offer. I mean, look, this is an army, as I said from the outset, that gang rapes its recruits. Yeah, they do that. This isn't news. Is it shocking? It's also not unfounded. It's been reported endlessly about how recruits in the Russian basic training get gang raped by their cohort. I mean, why would you have confidence and trust and be a team player for a military that you were conscripted into and then you're ass banged by other men? Why would you have any loyalty to a group like that? And then they send you out in T-55s and BMP-1s in the 21st century? Come on, man. There's just something wrong with that picture. Just something very much wrong with that picture. Very much wrong with that picture. Anyway. Yep. What else we got there? They're more impressive than 99% of Afghan armies. Well, yeah, they are. What's your point there, Arctic? When you're doing limbo and the bar is this low and it gets lower and lower, it really doesn't make much sense. What's a good place to go to learn about latest developments in military tactics? Russians adopting old Spartan style of military cohesion. I'm not an expert on telling you where to go find sources. I apologize for that. And it's kind of you to say that I'm a good source for it. I don't purport to be one, although I don't deny that I know what I'm talking about. Yep, that's right. We've got some news. So K-Naka will be on Wednesday after Ronaldo's program. Is Ronaldo still here, or did he fall asleep already? He's probably fallen asleep after eating his edibles. Yeah, so that was a joke. It was a joke, folks. Yeah, so K-Naka on Wednesday at 8 p.m. South Africa time. Dumo Denga and Koketso Ratsani will both be there. I haven't got any confirmations from anybody else, but since I got both of them, we're going to do it Wednesday. And then on Thursday at our normal broadcast time, we'll have Phil Craig, the leader of the referendum party from Western Cape, will be on the program. So looking forward to that as well. Also in the process of getting an interview scheduled with Chris Pappas, the mayor of Umgeni, Howick, who is running to be premier of the KwaZulu-Natal province for the Democratic Alliance. And I'm working on an interview potentially with Francois Rogers, the leader of the Democratic Alliance in the Eastern Cape. Of course, I've interviewed Francois Rogers previously after the floods, and I've interviewed Chris Pappas a couple of times in person, so this will be a long distance. So where would you Rank the armed forces 5th in the world? No. No. I would rank, gosh, if you just ask me off the cuff, the best militaries in the world, obviously the U.S. military, best equipped, most functional. And then for quality, we're talking about quality here. We're not talking about quantity. I wouldn't rank the Chinese second, but they would be ranked in the top 5. I'd probably put the Chinese Communist People's Liberation Army around number 4, number 5 on the planet. Despite its challenges, the German military is still very impressive, and I would put the Germans probably about 3rd. Where would I put the Russians? 4th? 4th, maybe? And that means I left number 2 off. Who would my number 2 be? Well, they're too small. Otherwise, I'd put Taiwan right up there. Taiwan has a very impressive military. Japan also has a very impressive self-defense force, but it hasn't been tested. South Korea's military is impressive, but they've not been tested in a while. So, would you do a 2024 update on Ukraine and Russia? Where we are and what we should probably expect next. Same for Gaza. Joking Atheist, probably at some point, but right now, with my running for political office, my time is very much absorbed by other things. Plus, the Israeli Defense Force, no, I don't think they're that impressive. You have to remember, RJ, that I worked with the Israeli Defense Force. I lived in Israel for 5 months in 1992, and I worked daily with the IDF. I was not impressed, not even remotely impressed. Not even remotely impressed. They're impressive for their region. They're the best in the region. Swiss military, good one, Erica, but not proven, but probably a very powerful force. Yep. Drops in a bucket says, can Somali pirates be taken out once identified as hostile trying to board a merchant ship? Yes. Drop in a bucket. International norms allow for global shipping to defend themselves. They have a right of self-defense. And if pirates try to take a commercial ship, they can light them up. That's perfectly legitimate. And that's why it's so puzzling that these international merchant shipping companies were so cheap and refused to put security forces on these vessels for years. Remember when these main attacks were happening off the coast of Somalia going back around 2011, 2012, 13, 14, that time frame? Why weren't these ships, only a handful of ships started doing it? Made a whole movie with Tom Hanks about being a captain on one of these ships. It's just nonsense. If they'd had their armed security on there, and if they provide their own resources like helicopters that could launch off the back of one of these cargo ships and attack these boats trying to attack them, they'd have been much better off. But they didn't do that. They relied on global militaries to help them. No, international norms, international treaty, the law of the sea allows for ships at sea to defend themselves if they're attacked from pirates. Pirates have no rights whatsoever. The South African Defense Force would have been one of the best militaries in the world, but today it's a sad joke. England, America, no one can win a war in Afghanistan. That's not true, Brian Lawrenson. America did win a war in Afghanistan. We did. The problem is that what's your definition of winning the war? That's the problem. So, just like we won in Vietnam. We won, we left. And then the weak South Vietnamese couldn't withstand the North Vietnamese, and they lost the war. Yep. All right, Alder Bridge, get some rest. It is early morning hours for you. Yep. I don't know if the IDF is the top 5 in 2024. They've proven it. Instead of using special forces and surgical strikes and precision strikes, they've just obliterated Gaza. To what end? All they've done is brought recrimination on themselves. They also failed to prevent the attack from occurring, and it took them up to 24 hours to respond to attacks when they're supposed to have troops on duty 24 hours a day with loaded firearms in position to respond to these attacks. The IDF is a complete embarrassment in October 7th until now. They got lazy, and they screwed up. The concept, whether it was the Israeli Defense Force or it was the government of Israel who decided to put their early warning network on a cell phone network as a primary means of communication, was the dumbest thing I've seen since, the formation of, I don't know what, not recently, MK just formed, so I can't say that. But the dumbest thing since people put Joe Biden forward to be president. That's the dumbest thing since that. Yeah. Why in the world would you put your primary means of communication on cell phones? I mean, does anybody not pay attention to events? Does anyone not know what happens when cell phones get saturated? Do they not realize that these aren't magical devices? They actually transmit radio waves over spectrum. And when lots of energy goes through the air, it interferes with other energy and knocks the signals off, and it's unreliable. When you run landline-based underground communications as your primary means, then you go with radio base with high frequency and ultra high frequency radios for your secondary, and your tertiary is satellite based communications. And then you also have semaphores and signals between locations. You have backup, you have redundancy in communications. As a former communications soldier, I can tell you that the stupidity of the Israeli Defense Force and the Israeli government in doing what they did in the early warning system contributed to the brutal rape, murder, death, mayhem, dismemberment of people that occurred on October 7th. The basics gone wrong. That's right. Yep, the basics gone wrong. What happens with alert? Ladies and gentlemen, let me just tell you how it used to work. This is 40 years ago, so it's not really breaking the news to anybody. All right, so I'm sitting at home sleeping, 3 o'clock in the morning. My phone rings. I have to pick it up and answer it. Larry to advance. That was the phrase meaning alert. And I didn't mean it. I didn't know if it was a drill. I didn't know if we're going to war. I didn't know if we were just training. You get up, you get in your vehicle, you drive to the concern, you go, you draw your weapon, you draw your communication security ciphers, you go to the motor pool, you inspect and fire up your vehicle, you account for your personnel, you start going through, you get a warning order issued to you by your leadership, and then you start planning for what's going on. And within short order, all within less than an hour, you roll out of the barracks into local pre-position locations to defend and advance to the general defense plan locations in the east. That's what you do. That's what we did for decades. The Israeli Defense Forces should have similar things in place. Why did they fail on October 7th? Why did it take a day and a half for Israeli forces to get to locations? And why did it take retired generals who lived in the region throwing on uniforms, grabbing their pistol out of their safe, jumping in their personally owned car, rallying troops who are being slaughtered by these terrorists, reorganize them with the necessary leadership to go and defend people? Why did that take 30 hours? In a country where you can run through the entire country in 40 minutes. You can't afford that. The Israeli Defense Force was not impressive. Hamas embarrassed the IDF. Hamas embarrassed Israel. And that might account for why they're pummeling Gaza into the Stone Age. I would have used special forces and special tactics to eliminate Hamas, not this scorched earth policy that's going on. Arctic, you are correct. Military failure often has nothing to do with military. It has to do with a lack of vision by governments. 9/11 wasn't a military failure. 9/11 was not an intelligence failure. The information was there. Government refused to accept or listen to the people who provided it to them. So these lies about 9/11 being an intelligence failure are just crap, total crap. As a counterintelligence agent, if I discovered terrorists abroad and found out that they entered the United States because of information I found abroad, I was prohibited from sharing that information with the FBI. Now, why would I share that with the FBI? Because they're also in the intelligence community. And guess what? I can't do intelligence in America. I can only do intelligence collection overseas, not in America. But if I had information, I was forbidden by Justice Department policy in the Clinton administration from sharing that information with the FBI. You know, guess how all the crisis happened. So 9/11 was not an intelligence failure. That's a total lie. And the IDF, there was an intelligence failure here because very few analysts, almost no analysts, actually predicted this sort of activity. They're claiming after the fact that they did, but it was a failure of leadership more so than intelligence failure. And I do blame the IDF. Why does it take the IDF 30 hours to respond to this crisis? 30 hours. You can't blame that on the government. The IDF is supposed to be available, ready to defend its borders in Judea, defend its borders in the Golan Heights, defend its borders from the Mediterranean, defend its borders from Jordan in the south of Eilat, defend its borders in the Sinai, defend its borders in Gaza in a moment's notice. When I lived in Israel 30 some years ago, Israel was a country on alert 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is why Israeli soldiers, regardless of where they are, must carry their weapon and ammunition with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You go to a shopping mall, you see young Israeli ladies wearing their uniform, walking around off duty, carrying their guns. Yep. My thoughts on why they failed is complacency, too much dependency on technology. Exactly, joking atheist, that's my point. we come to accept that these are the answer. As I said today, less than 1% of American homes have a fixed landline exclusively. I think like a third have a landline and a cell phone. I have both, but technically my land is not a line. It is a landline, but it's not plain old telephone system. It's over the cable network. So it's pseudo landline. It's not copper wire, plain old telephone system. So only 1% of American homes, whereas in 2000, 97% of American homes had a hard wire. So we have all this copper in the ground and in poles running across the country that is being underutilized right now. All that capacity not being used in phone companies. Yep. So yeah, it was complacency, and it was an over-reliance or dependency on technology. We did the same thing in the U.S. Army. And so when I was a young officer and we would do these deep battle things, I discovered a vulnerability for the U.S. military. So as a brigade intelligence officer, we would go whenever there was a tank regiment or an artillery group approaching the divisional artillery group, the DAG or the RAG, Regimental Artillery Group, or AG, Army Artillery Group, these big concentrations of artillery, which is what the Soviets do. And we see it playing out in Ukraine. The Russians still rely overwhelmingly on massed artillery to cause their damage. So these are lucrative targets for helicopters and for artillery to attack in what's called deep battle. At a certain point, we'd have indicators of movement, and a decision would be made to activate the deep battle cell, which was comprised of division artillery, the 4th Brigade with the combat aviation assets, and also with the division leadership and the intelligence people would all come in there, and we'd form the deep battle cell to Division Main. So I would have to physically get up, get in my vehicle, drive to Division Main headquarters, and participate in this. And this could go on for hours on end. But here's the thing. I discovered when we have these big tactical operations centers that they all run off of 30 kW generators, 30 kilowatt generators. Guess what? All you have to do is knock out 1 or 2 generators, and nobody could talk. Nobody could figure anything out. Then I discovered another weakness. When we switched to MSE, mobile subscriber equipment, which people thought was a nice upgrade. We used to use RT524s, radio transmitter 524s, which are FM radios. They do line of sight, and they broadcast 360, not line of sight. These radios broadcast 360, put the waves out every direction. Those radios, which you find in vehicles, and that's the ones you talk on, those radios, you have networks which are encrypted. And those networks, you'll have people operating on those networks, like the intelligence and operations networks and the operators and the intel guys around there, relaying the battlefield. Yeah. Delta 37, this is Foxtrot 25s, engage enemy at grid 372, Alpha Bravo 372, 715, distance 1,800 meters, engage 2 BMPs, 1 tank approaching from southwest on Route 3 at approximately this location. Yeah. And so you hear the battle unfolding as it occurs. And then the intelligence guys going, okay, this, and this. Well, the Army switched from using those radios as primary means of communication while I was a Brigade 2, as a lieutenant in a major's job, by the way. And they started using mobile subscriber equipment. Well, mobile subscriber equipment is a little handset, green handset with a black, same microphone used on, well, almost the same on those radios. You pick it up, you dial a number like a telephone, it goes out like a radio signal, but this one's line of sight to a communications node that the division runs, Division Signal Battalion runs, and then it gets parsed out and eventually goes down through copper, through cable and landlines to leaders. And it's a two-way conversation. I, as a Brigade 2, pick up the phone. I call the intel center at the division. Hey, the following's happening. I've got Apaches engaged at this grid. They've confirmed destroyed 3 T-72s, 1 BMP in this formation at this grid at this hour. Currently still engaged. All right. And then that's a two-way conversation. But before we went to mobile subscriber equipment, what I just said, everybody on the network with the encrypted information could hear it. So all the brigade intelligence officers could track the entire battle, and their intelligence analysts, they could, okay, this is going on. They get a picture of the battlefield. But what happened is that suddenly all those conversations disappeared because people picked up a microphone and had a two-way conversation, which excluded everybody. By the time that information got out, because the analysts of the division now taken, they make an update, they put it in the computer, they print out stuff, and then they send it out. By the time they did that, units are overrun. The battles moved beyond where it was going on. But in real time, not near real time right now, you had battlefield updates. And the Army went to this stuff, and it was stupid. Stupid. So an over-concentration on 30 kW and 50 kW generators, a stupid use of communications, undermine battlefield intelligence. Does that make sense to everybody? Israel is going way overboard. Was Israel's lead? Yeah, Jonathan, I think Israel at this point is going a bit overboard, but I don't contest their right to self-defense. And RG says, blows my mind that Hamas could keep that much logistics under wraps. Well, bear in mind that it was mostly in tunnels underground, and they're not easily monitored. Well, joking, he says, conspiracy theorist says October 7th was not a failure. Oh, no, it's not. No. Like the Tet Offensive of 1968, October 7th is a major strategic success for Hamas and Iran, especially for Iran. Who is castigating Iran for its nuclear program right now? The only thing Iran's getting in trouble for right now is shipping missiles to the Houthis. No one's talking about their support for Hezbollah, their support for the Hamas. No, this is a major strategic victory for Iran to continue fleecing money for consumers for overpriced oil because of Joe Biden's war on energy, and also for them to continue to arm terrorists and malcontents around the planet and expand their influence. Yeah, no, Iran is getting off the hook. They have a major victory. And Hamas won a major victory. I don't care if they lost 5,000 or 7,000 fighters. That's really not germane. Hamas knew they would take major casualties. Hamas knew they would never overthrow Israel or cause the collapse of the country with this attack, with the number of fighters they had. This was meant to terrorize, to dehumanize, and to abuse Israelis, to frighten them, but more importantly, to get an overwhelming response from Israel so that they could condemn Israel and the global stage would turn on the Jewish state. And that is exactly what has happened from the very outset. The lies that have been told about this from the very beginning have led to a marginalization and isolation of the Israeli state, even amongst the Biden regime now. They're talking about it. Yeah, so that is a major strategic victory for Hamas, a major strategic victory for Iran, which I said from the very beginning. And who's the big strategic loser here? Israel. This doesn't make Israel any more secure. Even at this point, the eradication of Hamas leaves Israel vulnerable because the International Court of Justice, public opinion, none of which really matters, but it does have an effect on Israel's ties and relations. And all of this, of course, comes on the heels of Jared Kushner and Donald Trump's historic and unprecedented Abraham Accords, which established diplomatic relations, reestablished between Morocco and Israel, established diplomatic relations between Sudan and Israel, established diplomatic relations between the United Arab Emirates and Israel, and restored economic ties with Arab states and ended decades of isolation of Israel. All of this has destroyed that, including Saudi Arabia. It's completely undermined all that, which was the intent. That is why Hamas, at the encouraging and exhortation of the Iranians, attacked Israel on October 7th to stop the Abraham Accords, to undermine Trump's peace efforts in the Middle East. And it has succeeded. Not entirely, but in many respects. Of course, the Abraham Accords are a threat. Anything that establishes recognition of the Jewish state is a threat to racist, theocratic bigots in Tehran, Riyadh, Amman, Cairo, Tunis, Algiers, Beirut, and Damascus. Yep. Not to mention bigots in Ankara. Let's not forget the Turks, too. They're not Arabs, but let's not forget them. Nobody's prepared to take on Iran. Well, I wouldn't say that's true. Trump took on Iran, killed Soleimani, didn't he? Killed Soleimani. And that's another thing. Iran is still bumhurt over the assassination of Soleimani, a vile, repulsive human being who was taken out by the Trump regime in Iraq. And this is part of it, is payback for that nonsense. Yep. So there you go. Anyway. All right. Wow. 2 hours, folks. I do have to wrap it up because I have a physical therapy appointment. And I have to be there in a bit, so I'm going to take off here. Thank you all for being in today. Appreciate it. Be sure to hit the like button. We got 100 likes, 87 people here right now. Sorry to depart on you right now, folks, but I do have to go. And then I've also got a political meeting this evening, an event that I'm going to, which I have to go drive a ways for. So you guys take care, and thank you so much. Be sure to hit the like button on your way out the door. It costs you nothing but a moment of your time.
That was easy.
Yeah, Israel was prepared to take him out. Israel is also, but it's dangerous. That's really dangerous. They also are the ones who took out the Iraqi nuclear program back in the 1980s. It was an incredible mission there. All right, folks. Catch you later. Thanks a lot. Really enjoy your patrons. God bless and be safe out there. Cheers.